is about automated market makers. Now, this is easily one of the most talked about primitives or concepts in DeFi these days, but it's actually one of the least understood and most scariest ones to actually understand. And to be honest, it's taken me a while to really wrap my head around these crazy twisted machines. And I hope that this video unravels some of the mystery for you. So in this video, first before we even talk about what an automated market maker is, I want to actually talk about how a traditional order book works, because then that gives us context as to what problem an order book has on the blockchain with smart contracts and why automated market makers actually solve this problem. So once we know why we need automated market makers and why they're so good, we can then talk about how they work and some of the maths around it, so that when you come across this in the wild, you have a much better intuition. So let's get started. Cool. So number one, traditional order books. This is basically how any existing exchange works in the real world right now. And so we have Bob, who says, I want to sell something, say $10 of a coin, right? And this is his coins over here. And then you have Alice over here, who says, I want to buy $9 worth of some coin over here. And the role of the exchange, which is in the middle over here, is to match both of these two together and helping them, essentially what we call, fill each other's orders. So in this case, Bob would sell essentially 90% of his order, because it's his $9, his $10, 9 of it is being filled over here, and Alice, her $9 is entirely filled. Now this is very, very simplified, but the point which I want to illustrate here is that this exchange is kind of like a matchmaking service, where it says, okay, you have a buyer, you have a seller, let's connect them and do what we need to fill this order. Now, if we go in a bit more depth, the way an order actually looks is we might have, say, sell 10 ETH at $100 over here. So we have the quantity and the price. And then we might have, on the other side, someone saying buy 5 ETH at $90, right? And what you have kind of here is kind of a war, right? Because this person wants to sell 10 at $100, and this person wants to buy 5 at 90. And essentially what we then see in the order book is these two entries next to each other. And the way the price is calculated is when these two kind of agree to come in the middle. So Alice might say, it's been 10 minutes, nobody's taken my order, let me offer instead of $90, $95 and see if anyone takes. Bob waits a while and he says, no one's taking 100. Let me maybe offer 97. And eventually there's a point at which they meet, and let's suppose that's actually eventually $95 because Bob decides to come down. So the price of, say, ETH in this case is now going to be set at $95. And what we're essentially saying here is that there's kind of like a tug of war between sells and buys. And if you've ever seen an exchange, you kind of have these graphs that look a little something like this, where This is your middle. Right, where you've got like this green versus red war going on. And what this really is saying is the kind of depth of the order book at different prices. So these are all the orders at, say, $10, at $100, and $1,000. And what you can kind of see is that like how much buying and selling pressure is there at different price points and for what quantities. So of course with this, you can kind of see that order books in their traditional sense are quite complex because you have to essentially find a price which the other side wants to buy at without losing too much value in the process. So this kind of has worked great for many years because in traditional finance, because we have fast computers that can keep changing these things. Now, the issue with smart contracts, when we kind of simplify it down, is that they are slow. They are expensive, and they are, they're so inexpensive basically. And what this means is that when we want to run a traditional order book like the above, it's not really that straightforward because the smart contract has to keep on being called, and each call incurs a cost, it takes time. So essentially, a traditional order book on a smart contract is terrible because if one transaction takes anywhere between, say, like 1 to 5 minutes and maybe like 20 cents to $1, we can't really be paying this much of a fee to just even update a trade, not even for it to settle. So what the whole beauty around automated market makers is that they solve this order book problem for smart contracts. And how do they do that? Let's kind of dig in. So let's use a nice blue here. So AMMs. The real magic is essentially that there is no order book. What? Yeah, it's really cool. The way it works is that the smart contract basically calculates a price continuously, and buyers and sellers can determine whether they want to buy or sell at a predetermined price. There is no order book. So rather than in our previous example where we had Bob and Alice coming together and meeting on an exchange, we now have a different model where Bob simply goes to a smart contract and it will give him back a price. And we have Alice on the other side who also will go to the same smart contract and will get a price. Neither of these two actually are ever trading against each other. They simply trade with the smart contract. And the whole thing around this is that the price is calculated on essentially a ratio between the two tokens. So we'll go deeper into this next bit around the math and how this kind of works, but I just want to reiterate the fact that there is no order book. It's simply you get quoted a price and you take it or you leave it. Now, how is this price determined? I kind of touched on this as a ratio, but let's dig into it a bit more. So this is what I call AMM Math 101, or the conceptual understanding. Okay, so the way AMM math works is, as we said before, between a ratio of two tokens. Now, the way this ratio is calculated is through an equation called x times y, which gives us a constant, as in this never changes. So let's suppose that the price of ETH is at $100 and DAI is $1. The way an AMM works to begin with is that we supply an equal amount of quantities of each token. So if we want to supply an equal amount of ETH and DAI, let's say, and at $1,000 of each quantity, we would supply 10 Ethereum and 1,000 DAI, which gives us 10,000 is our constant. Now, if this is X and this is Y, this is K, the price of ETH is equal to Y divided by X, which is 1,000 divided by 10, which is 100. That checks out. And the price of DAI is equal to X divided by Y, which is 10 divided by 1,000, which is equal to 0.01. Cool. Now, essentially, the way this kind of works is when someone makes a trade, is that they give a quantity of one token and get back another from the pool. So now let's say somebody wants to buy ETH from the pool, and let's just say they want to buy 1 ETH. So what that essentially means is they're going to be giving ETH to the pool and taking DAI in return. So we had 10 ETH originally, and they're taking away 1. And we had 1,000 DAI in the pool, and we're going to be getting a certain amount. But at the end of the day, this has to equal back to 10,000. And once we figure out X, we can figure out the prices. So let's just go ahead and carry on. So we've got 9 times 1,000 plus X is equal to 10,000. So 1,000 plus X is equal to 10,000 divided by 9, which means 1,000 plus X is equal to, let's do this, 10,000 divided by 9, 1,111, 1,100.11, which means X is equal to 1,111 minus 1,000. This is 111. I know I've simplified the decimals. So what we're seeing over here is that in order for this person to buy 1 ETH from the pool, they are going to be paying $111 for that ETH. Or, sorry, no, the price of ETH in the pool has now changed to $111. And why did that happen? Simply because the ratio of ETH to DAI changed. And that's conceptually like how the math around an automated market maker works. And now kind of getting a bit deeper is the fact that this is not actually the real price means that somebody else is going to take advantage and bring the price back to what it should be. So let's say the price is actually still $100 on Coinbase, but the price to buy ETH over here is $111. So what someone will do is they'll get ETH from Coinbase and try and sell it back to the automated market maker. So in this case, let's go back to our simple equation where we have 9 ETH in the pool and we have 1,111 DAI in the pool, with our constant being 10,000. So somebody's saying that I managed to get this $100 worth of ETH, or this ETH for $100, and I can now make an $11 profit by giving it back to this pool itself. So what they'll do is they'll say, here you go, pool, I'm going to give you 1 extra ETH, and you will give me a certain amount of die back. And this is going to be 10,000. Now, in case this kind of looks familiar, this is exactly what we kind of had when we started off with. And you can, just to run through the math, we can go through this. Minus x equals 10,000. 111 minus x equals 1,000. X is equal to 111. Yep. Which means that our equation is now at, and that's exactly where we started off with. So in essence, someone bought ETH, which subtracted 1 ETH from the pool, and bought a bunch of die, which changed the ratios to this new price over here. Then someone else realized this is the incorrect price, so they got the ETH from somewhere else, sold it back to the pool, made an $11 profit, and in return, they bought the price back to what it should be. So the way an AMM works is essentially relying on arbitrages, or ARBs as we call them, to bring back the price by finding these profit opportunities. And intuitively, if we draw out this equation, x times y equals k, it kind of looks a little something like this. And you basically keep moving. So say this is your token x and this is your token y. Basically, you keep moving up and down this curve based on the ratio of tokens. And the more tokens that you have in both quantities, or the bigger that your k is, the smaller the price change if you buy or sell a certain quantity of tokens. And like, just to get a really clear understanding, if we had, say, 10 times 1,000, which gives us 10,000, as we used in our example, by buying 1 ETH, you're changing the pool by the price by almost 10%. But if this number was actually, say, 1,000 times 100,000, then this K is much larger. And as a result, if you bought or sold 1 ETH, it would probably have a less than 1% change in the price. And that's what we call order book depth. So the deeper the order book is, the less the price change as you buy a larger quantity of tokens. And that's what makes AMM so powerful, because all I have to do is give 2 quantities of tokens to the smart contract, and it will in turn set the correct price and make sure that I can consistently make money for providing this liquidity. And the way I do it is that each trade that occurs on an AMM incurs a fee, usually to the tune of about 0.3% to maybe 0.1%. So every time I buy and take tokens from this curve, I pay a little fee. And that's why I'm incentivized to give a bit of ETH and a bit of DAI to essentially what we call be a market maker. And hopefully that, ladies and gentlemen, gives you an overview of how an AMM works. So just to kind of re-summarize, we have traditional order books, which are kind of a constant negotiation between buyers and sellers. But as we learned, that the problem with order books is that there's this kind of consistent kind of updating or editing that needs to happen. And because smart contracts are slow and expensive, this isn't really feasible. So instead, we have automated market makers, which rely on no order books, and the smart contract calculates the price. And the way it calculates the price is by determining the ratio of determining the price by determining the ratio of 2 tokens. And we determine that through this equation called x times y equals k, where we will always get one side of the equation which we want to say update. We work out the difference, and that difference can then tell us the new price. And any shift in the price from the real price means that arbitrages can restore the price by selling back to the pool or kind of reversing the trade. And because of this entire system and its elegance of the smart contract calculating the price, we don't actually need order books. We simply have a contract which tells us the price of the quantity of tokens that we're buying. And the deeper the order book is, the less change in price we experience. So, yeah, and if I provide liquidity, as in I provide both X and Y to this equation, I will earn a fee for doing so because I'm providing service to other users. And that is literally just how an automated market maker works at a very conceptual level. I'll make other videos which goes into this in more detail, but hopefully this gives you all a very good understanding of how these things work and why they're so useful. Thanks. See ya.